Well, today I was hoping to put the lower gear case on finally. Then get some fluid in this thing and test run it and see if it's going to circulate water like it should and keep the motor cool. But I've got a problem. Yep, another problem. I can't seem to catch a break on this thing. I was just looking at the tubes and, well, let me show you. Alright, these are the two coolant tubes that are going to have to go into those grommets on the top of that cover. And the problem is that this one is quite a bit shorter than this one. And I'm going to find out exactly how much shorter it is in a minute. So I know that this tube right here, I pretty much know that that's going to come right down onto that soft squishy gasket material. And then, so that means that this tube right here, I can get a measurement how far this extends down past this tube. And then also with this one. And then I can kind of do some math to figure out how much shorter each one of these tubes is. This tube is than the other one. The other thing I could do is I've got this bottom edge here I know that it mates up against when the gear case is in position. I could put a straight edge along the bottom of that. In other words, if I put a straight edge along the bottom of this gear case like this, and then take a measurement from the top edge of that straight edge to the bottom of each tube, then I can also play around with some math and figure out what's going on here. So I'm going to use my vernier caliper, and what's nice is that it's got this depth gauge right here in the bottom, so I can use that and get a pretty accurate reading on the measurements I'm taking. Alright, so what I ended up doing was I took this file and I laid it flat up against the bottom edges of the gear case. And then I took my vernier caliper depth gauge and I extended it, and I held the very end right there on the very bottom edge of each tube, each measurement I wanted to take. And then I just pushed up on the caliper until this edge right here hit up against the bottom edge of this file. Then I took the measurement and then I subtracted the thickness of the file, which was exactly 100 thousandths, which made it easy, and I got the following measurements. 1.4 inches from the bottom edge of the gear case to the bottom edge of the longer pipe. 2.05 inches from the bottom edge of the gear case to the bottom edge of the shorter pipe. And then just for the heck of it, I took a measurement from the bottom edge of the gear case to the bottom edge of the tube that actually houses the drive shaft. So that was 2.250. So I'm going to make myself a little illustration. Alright, so this is a crude little drawing I just made here, a sketch. Actually, one of these two is the longer one, forget which one it is. Hold on. Okay, the one that's closer to the one of the coolant tubes that's closer to the drive tube is the longer one, so I should have tried to incorporate that in my sketch. Alright, so now that's the longer one, that's the shorter one, and there's the drive tube. So from the bottom edge of the drive tube to the bottom edge of the cooling tower, we'll call that the cooling tower, that's my 2.250. And then bottom edge of this pipe to the bottom edge of the tower, that's the shorter, let's see, the longer tube, so it's going to be the shorter of these two distances, which is going to be the 1.4. And then the bottom edge of this one to the bottom edge is going to be the longer distance, the 2.05. So I can see that if I take the 2.05 and I subtract the 1.4 from that, I'm going to get my my distance, which is 40, 5, 1, 10, 6, 0.65. So 650 thousandths, more than a half inch difference in the size of those two tubes. So that's going to be a problem, because I'm pretty sure those grommets are at the same depth. Alright, so this is the edge right here that's supposed to meet up to the bottom edge of that cooling tower. So I can measure from this surface up to the tops of the tops of these two openings right here, and then subtract from that the distance down to the top of the grommet, and I can kind of figure out the math here too on how far that tube needs to go into here to make sure that it actually seals into there. Alright, so this measurement's even easier to take because of the gear case. I can just touch off down here on the gear case and just bring it down until the vernier touches the top there, and that gives me the dimension from this top edge of the gear case to the very top of this tube. And then I'll take that dimension, and from that I'll subtract the distance from the top of the grommet to top here, and I'll be able to also give myself a nice little drawing there. So let's do that. Alright, so I brought the diagram down here to the basement where I've got the gear case so we can better see what the problem is, the main issue. So we know that the distance from this mating surface here to this top edge, which on my diagram is this line right here to this top edge, is 2.380 inches. So we know that when this line is brought up to this line, which is this mating surface is mated up with the bottom of the cooling tower, that this top edge is going to be sticking up into that tower 2.38 inches. So we know if we take 2.38 inches and we subtract the 1.4 inches from the bottom edge of this tube to the bottom edge, which I did over here, 2.38 minus 1.4, gives us 0.980, or 980 thousandths, just under 1 inch. So that means that this bottom edge of this tube right here is going to be sticking down into this hole from this top edge 1 inch. Now we have to account for the distance from this top edge down to the top of the grommet, which is 450 thousandths. So we subtract 450 thousandths from 980 and we get 0.530, 530 thousandths, just a shade over half an inch, which is good news. That means that this copper tube's bottom edge is going to stick down into that grommet area just over half an inch. And that's going to be ideal. It's going to be great because we've got room for it to do that, and that'll make a good seal. That's the good news. The bad news is our other tube. Our other tube, this dimension is 2.05 inches. If I take 2.05 inches away from the 2.38, that only gives us 330 thousandths. So I can set my vernier here to 330 thousandths and show you what that looks like. 30, there we go, 330 thousandths. Not very far at all. You can see that what's going to happen is that copper, the bottom edge of the shorter copper tube is going to stick down into here, and that would have been pretty much where it would have bottomed out against the solid, remember that I'm talking about this one here. This one here, this is the one I had to drill out. So yeah, that would have bottomed out right into that flattened solid bottom that was in here originally. So I think what happened was, I think that whoever was trying to put this together realized they couldn't get the gear case to go up with that tube being as long as it was, that it was interfering with it. So what they did was, I think they cut the bottom of that tube off. The bottoms of both those tubes look like they've got a little bit of damage on them, like they were bashed around a little bit. I think they cut the tube off. So my problem now is, if I put it together the way it is right now, that tube's going to sit in here. It's not going to insert into this grommet at all, so it's not going to seal well at all. And I'm thinking that's going to be a problem. So I'm going to have to either replace that tube or find a way to extend that tube. Regardless, I got the same basic problem, which is I'm going to have to remove this whole housing right here. So I do have 2 extra grommets, so I guess as long as I'm going to go through the trouble of taking that housing off, I might as well replace the grommets that go where these tubes insert into the power head. I wasn't planning on replacing those only because of the difficulty of taking this tower off. I got a feeling the bolts are going to be all corroded and it's going to be a nightmare. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this tower off, then I'm going to get these tubes out, and then I'm going to see whether or not I can procure cheap tubes, or if necessary, what I might do is I might actually cut these tubes back a little further to where they're nice and round, and actually use 1/2-inch copper couplings and solder on new ends. And the reason why I won't just replace the entire tube is because the tubes tend to have a dog leg, I think, in them at some point, so they're not perfectly straight. In other words, they kind of come down like this, go over, and then come down. And I'm going to have a heck of a time trying to bend a copper tube into that shape unless I use soft copper tubing or something like that. But I think the easier thing might be to just cut it and splice on a new piece. So that's the latest delay in putting this thing back together.